Thomas's hometown threw a parade to show their support. Probably been up in arms about the Thomas hearings. Minute by minute, the senators seem to debunk what young attorneys learned in Law School 101. Deborah Weiner has their reaction, which for some is just shy of indignant.
They held each other and salvaged what they could. In Baltimore, Doug Wilson, Fox 45 News at 10.
29 people have died so far this year in Baltimore fires. Last year's toll at this time was 23 dead. Coming up in tonight's cover story, a look at the fire dangers that you face in the workplace.
Now, such tragic fires remind all of us just how much we depend on firefighters. Now the threat of losing as many as 250 Baltimore firefighters could very well become a reality. The talk at fire stations today, the public will be the loser. Here's Lori Stokes.
Baltimore firefighters say it's just a rumor, but this could be their biggest battle yet. Their livelihoods could be in jeopardy. They got the word this morning over the city fire department's PA system.
Down headquarters tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, 410 East Lexington Street. Fire board's going to have the information on the layoffs and the company cuts.
So who might get a pink slip and have to hang up their boots? Luckily for some, seniority counts.
A lot of young guys are, they're holding their breath to see what happens tomorrow.
We used to have a bumper sticker many years ago that said, "What if you had a fire and nobody came?"
Sajensky says that could happen if trimming the city's budget means shutting down 14 companies and laying off up to 250 firefighters. It's part of the trickle-down theory from state cuts. It's also what Mayor Schmoke talked about 2 weeks ago as a sensitive area affecting the quality of life. Fire Board says if the mayor wants a 6% payroll cut, this is the only answer. That's not what unions want.
If they're cutting out over 10% of the companies that are in the city right now, the possibility exists that help isn't going to be arriving that quickly.
Baltimore's fire department can boast of a 1.5 to 2 minute response time. Some say, as it is, engines run with only 3 men. Less than that could be disastrous.
3 people, it's hard because you got one person gets out and he leads off from the fire hydrant. You got the driver who takes care of operating the pumps, and then that leaves 1 man, the officer. He's by himself until another company arrives, and then you get help. If you got people in there, you got to get them. You got to do it, and it's just you.
Now, keep in mind, as of tonight, nothing is definite. How many companies will close is still a mystery. How many layoffs is still up in the air. What is clear is tomorrow morning a meeting is scheduled at headquarters to lay it on the table. My understanding is while seniority is a factor, officers with the ranks of, say, lieutenant could be bumped down not only in rank but in salary. Everyone could be fair game. We'll just have to wait until tomorrow. Lisa and Jeff?
Okay, Lori, thank you very much for that report tonight. Len Johnson says a warm breeze may very well be on the way.
But he also said something about a 4...
News at 10 airline employees at BWI are being asked to take pay cuts. Will the cutbacks affect U.S. Air flights? We'll have more.
And how would you like to get a free fall makeover for your home? Well, it's happening for one 73-year-old Harford County man. We'll have that story.
Tragedy in Miami. 2 school children are killed in a freak school bus accident. We'll tell you about it.
And in tonight's cover story, is the building you work in set up to protect you from a possible killer fire? Fire safety in the workplace. In tonight's cover story, No Way Out. This afternoon, when the building he was working in exploded. The worker was in a building with pyrotechnic fuses when he saw flames. Firefighters say that the man got out just before the fireworks were ignited. No one else was in the plant at the time and no other buildings were destroyed. Damage is estimated at about $85,000 and the cause is still under investigation. A devastating fire last month in North Carolina is now raising concerns in Maryland.
That blaze killed 25 people at a North Carolina chicken plant. It had blocked fire exits and was never inspected. That's why the Maryland State Fire Marshal's office is concerned. It says with a tight state budget, that tragedy may very well happen here. The fire marshal says to ensure fire safety procedures for all Maryland's workers, there may be no way out. Few people go to work thinking they'll get hurt or even killed when the work shift ends. But sometimes the worst case scenario occurs. It happened to 25 people who were killed last month in a chicken plant fire in North Carolina. It was discovered a fire exit that could have served as a major escape route out of that building was locked, leaving the workers to die in an inferno. It was determined the plant was never inspected in its 11 years of existence. The Maryland State Fire Marshal's Office says the same thing can happen here because of what it calls a lack of manpower.
There may even be buildings that have been built in Maryland and that are operating that have never seen the light of a fire marshal ever.
Another problem may be an employer's ignorance in making the safety of its workers a main concern.
We could have 1,000 inspectors out there from all different agencies inspecting and then turn around and leave the establishment feeling secure and safe, and then changes can be taking place in that establishment to obstruct or lock the exits.
The state fire marshal says 20 to 30,000 businesses in the state of Maryland that should be inspected each year are not because of lack of manpower. Officials at the office say instead, inspectors have to focus their attention on what they call high-risk areas, places like daycare centers, nursing homes, hospitals, and schools. But according to this recently released MOSH report obtained by Fox 45 News at 10, the North County High School here in Linthicum, with 1,140 students, was recently cited for having 2 blocked fire exits in its auditorium. MOSH says the 2 exits were blocked by props that were used on the nearby stage. Although school business manager Doug Cook refused to comment on camera, he did say the props were removed and the exits are now clear.
Unfortunately, sometimes administrators in schools make decisions to move materials into the area, or maybe even a maintenance technician may be making that decision at a lower level and not in consideration of the exit component and maintaining the exits.
MOSH says from September 1st to the present, 30 establishments have been cited for not properly maintaining fire exits statewide, including, of all places, a volunteer fire department in Hyattstown and a fire rescue unit in Montgomery County.
Well, I think that brings to point the fact that, all of us need to pay attention to different components of exits in our work establishments. It's something that can occur anywhere.
Make sure they're not brittle or dried out.
In most cases, a routine fire inspection consists of checking firefighting equipment, including sprinkler systems, and making sure they would work if a blaze erupted. Evacuation systems are also checked, making sure emergency lights work, and that exits are properly marked and clear. Such inspections help in minimizing the chances of lives being lost, regardless of the time or money it cost the employer. This particular inspection we attended with Baltimore County fire inspectors at the Elias Wolf Warehouse in Owings Mills passed.
It gives me peace of mind. It also enables me to better concentrate on what I have to do in order to get my job done.
There's no doubt that when we hear of those tragedies like that happened down south, you can sympathize with all the people, and you remember it, and it comes into play whenever you walk into places. And you can use it, unfortunately, as an example sometimes.
To avoid such examples, the State Fire Marshal's Office says it tries targeting 40,000 inspections like this each year statewide. But in reality, with a staff of only 35 state inspectors and a state budget that guarantees a skeletal crew for now, only about 15,000 sites are inspected each year. That's less than half of what's required by law.
We simply, with our manpower that we have today, cannot meet our mandated responsibilities that's set forth by law.
And it appears because of a sluggish economy, that's not going to change anytime soon. The State Fire Marshal's Office says if you think there may be a potential fire hazard in your place of employment, you're asked to call the office at this number, 764-4324. That number again is 764-4324. As understaffed as the office says it is, you could be saving it time by bringing your concern to an inspector's attention. That way the inspectors wouldn't have to spend a lot of time looking for what could be a potential fire hazard.
In tomorrow night's cover story, just how safe are you in your own home if a fire should break out? Tomorrow night, the dangers that could be lurking in your house. Tomorrow on the news at 10.
Now, Howard and Baltimore counties are having a very tough time keeping up with pace of traffic.
Ahead in the news at 10 in our suburban sweep, how an increase in population is causing
loss. This daily number can be far greater.
And whether this loss occurs gradually or quickly, there comes a point when the hair loss can no longer be denied.
One day I was playing with my nephew and he was crawling on my body, and he crawled up to my head, and he was sort of wandering around my head. And he said, "Uncle Jim, what are all these big white spots on your head?" And at first I thought he was talking about dandruff, and then I realized he was talking about my scalp. And I realized that I was really bald. I think there's a tremendous bias in our society in favor of youth and vigor. I don't think anybody wants to hasten the process of looking older. You want to accept it gracefully when it happens. There's nothing wrong with looking your age, but you don't want to hasten it or have it happen sooner than you feel. I could feel hair back there, and so I always lied to myself and said, well, it's really not that receded. And then I would look in a mirror, and I would try to tell myself, well, it just happens to be the way the hair is falling. And then finally I just realized that it was real thin. And then it started getting thinner all along in here, and they were meeting. The receding hairline and the crown were meeting. And the thing that bothered me the most was that all the hair all over the top of my head was getting thinner. I stopped losing hair within a month, within 2 months, which I was surprised because I was told it would take 6 months. But then hair started growing back. It just started looking fuller. At first it was pretty imperceptible, but I'd say within 6 months it was radically different. People do notice the difference, and it's wonderful. I love it when people say, oh yeah, your hair looks a lot thicker, a lot fuller. We like to think we don't care about compliments on our looks, but it's nice. It's nice to hear.
So what are we hearing here, doctors? That every male who wants to be complimented on his looks and who starts to lose more than 85 hairs a day should use Rogaine and his worries are over?
Not at all. On occasion, you come across results such as Jim's. But his results are only seen in about 8% of patients.
The decision to use Rogaine is a very personal one. It's one that a man needs to discuss with his physician. We are dealing with a prescription pharmaceutical here, and of course, as is the case with many prescription products, they don't work the same for everyone.
But getting with a dermatologist and discussing hair loss treatment options, including whether Rogaine is appropriate, is definitely a first step.
I've got patients, as do many dermatologists, who've had good results with Rogaine, and others who've seen only minimal regrowth. The degree of success can vary greatly. I tell my patients that a 4 to 6 month trial with Rogaine is necessary to fairly evaluate whether Rogaine is for them.
And it's essential that patients using Rogaine understand the importance of compliance. Rogaine should be used twice a day, every day, using the recommended dosage.
Clinical studies indicate that after 4 months of treatment with Rogaine, hair growth is seen in 34% of all cases. Studies of patients using Rogaine have shown that the most common side effects directly attributable to Rogaine topical solution were itching and other skin irritations of the treated area of the scalp. About 5% of patients had these complaints. After 12 months of use, the percentage that benefits increases considerably. But the solution is not effective for everybody, and in those for whom it does work, growth is often only moderate. 8% of all cases achieve dense growth. In clinical studies, this patient was evaluated as having minimal regrowth. This patient as having moderate regrowth, and this patient as having dense regrowth.
There's a greater chance of achieving dense growth in younger patients for whom the period of hair loss has not been long. In other patients that I've seen, about 40% see some growth.
And there's another percentage of patients who see little or no growth. What it really comes down to is that it's important that patients need to have realistic expectations when they start using Rogaine.
That's for sure. I've seen patients who've had good, moderate regrowth, but were disappointed because they had unrealistically high expectations. On the other hand, I've had patients who are more than satisfied with minimal regrowth.
Let's rejoin our friends in Colorado to hear from someone who wanted to do something for his hair loss, but initially had very low expectations for Rogaine.
I was terrified that when I reached 30, it would all happen. You know, I'd put on weight and I'd start, becoming more unhealthy. I'd stop exercising. And that's really what happened, and of course my hair would start going. And it was really like a nightmare come true. And the reality was that I was, hiding how I felt about it. Every time I noticed that I was getting a little balder, and I had this thing which is like starting to fill in now, but I had some stuff on the back of my head. It was sort of getting very thin, and then in between there was like this valley, and then there was like this bit at the front which was a bit like Woody the Woodpecker. I really didn't have any expectations because I was one of these people at the time that thought, well, you know, it probably won't work for me then because, you know, it's like, this is my life. But, you know, I was still ready to try it out, and I'm really pleased I did. But I was excited. It was like just 5 months before I saw quite a bit of, you know, filling in on the back of my crown. And it continues. It's thicker now than it was then. That's a couple of months ago. So it's, you know, continuing to work. The hurdle was actually, you know, making a commitment to do it for a space of time and see if it worked. And then, you know, it sort of gave me permission to do a lot of other things in my life in the same way, you know, and to go for the opportunities in my life when they appeared, not to worry about them. I started feeling a lot better just because I'd set out with intention to go, you know, and not to turn back. And, you know, I felt the benefits of that, you know, in every way. I don't think you have to wait until you're 30 to start trying to improve the quality of your life. I think it's an ongoing process. The sooner you start, the better.
Well, now, Mike seems to feel that doing something about his hair loss has improved his whole outlook on life.
It sure seems that way, and that's not unusual. How we look does affect how we feel, and that in turn affects our outlook on life. We see that correlation a lot in dermatology. Mike's feelings are those that I think would be shared with other men in a similar situation.
So as physicians, what do you tell your patients when they come to you with a hair loss problem?
First, I tell them there are no promises. Of course, no guarantees. But while there is no cure for hereditary hair loss, there are medical options, including the use of Rogaine as well as hair transplants and cosmetic surgery. Clearly, Rogaine is the first treatment option for ease of use.
That's right, but I also have to be honest with them. Tell them that we'll never know how well or if Rogaine will work for them until they try it. There are just too many variables to predict results. It might be helpful to understand briefly how the hair growth process works. Hair is a fiber made of a protein called keratin. It's attached at its root to the epidermis by means of a bulb known as the capillary follicle. This follicle is able to produce 1 millimeter of hair every 3 days. That's about ½ an inch a month. Hair follows a growth cycle. In the first stage, it grows for 2 to 5 years. Then the follicle passes through a transitional stage, and that lasts from about 1 to 2 weeks before finally entering a state of rest with a duration of approximately 3 months. It's the hairs of this stage that usually end up in brushes and combs. And if they're not pulled out by brushing or combing, they end up falling out, pushed by new hair growth at the roots. Hair constantly renews itself, and so long as the capillary follicle remains intact, the cycle repeats itself. When a person loses his hair for genetic reasons, the new hairs that appear with each growth cycle become smaller and finer. This is a gradual process, and it continues until the hair has been replaced by a kind of vellus hair. Rogaine reverses this miniaturization process. The Hamilton scale shows the diverse patterns of hair loss in men. About 90% of individuals genetically predisposed to losing their hair suffer from one of these patterns of hair loss. In the United States, some 70 million people have lost or are losing their hair.
And while it doesn't work the same for everyone, Rogaine is the only product that has been shown to grow hair.
Well, now let's meet Tony, the youngest man on the rafting trip. He's a guy who started losing his hair at a very early age and started using Rogaine soon thereafter.
I started realizing it when, I guess when my brother started making fun of me. And I was around 21, 22, somewhere in between that group. And I started noticing it myself when I'm showering and I see the hair in the tub and so on. We're all self-conscious of everything, and I'm self-conscious of that. I was a little skeptical, of course, but after the first 4 months, I felt results. I felt positive. I think it's worth a try for anybody who's suffering from this problem. And if they see positive results, then go for it. It took me 4 months to see results, then I'm gonna continue using it. I'm very positive. I feel more energetic. I wanna work out more. I wanna go out, associate with people more, because I feel like there's something actually positive occurring. It didn't just boom, yeah, look, it's happening. It happened. Meeting certain people I haven't seen in a while. Every time they say positive, I just feel positive. It's not like a big bang, but it's very rewarding all the same.
Feeling better. And we keep hearing that comment, don't we?
Certainly. Feeling good is important. We've seen that throughout the interviews, and I see it all the time in my practice. Many guys who are starting to lose their hair don't feel good about themselves. Rogaine gives them the opportunity to try to reverse those feelings.
Everyone wants to feel good. And for many men, that means trying to keep a full head of hair, if at all possible. And for many who are experiencing hair loss, that means coming to a decision with their physician to give Rogaine a try.
I don't think you can use Rogaine because someone else tells you to use it. I think you have to do it for yourself because you want to use it and you want to have hair on yourself. My feeling is if there is something that I can control and there's something out there that can help me keep my hair, then I'm going to go ahead and give it a try and use it. And in my case, I'm happy that it worked. I know there have been other products on the market that say they promote hair growth, and I've been speaking to a lot of people about it, and they don't work. So you're somewhat skeptical when you first use another product, but this one clearly works. Do what's right for you. If you don't mind going bald, don't use it. If you mind it, there's a solution out there for you. Give it a try. Well, my doctor was going bald, and he's using the product, and it's working for him. I noticed results probably about 3 to 4 months after I started using it. And it hasn't stopped working. It's working. It's working for me. When I first realized it was working, probably just, blow drying my hair in the morning and realizing, hey, I got something here that wasn't there before. And, it's a gradual process. It doesn't happen overnight. And just gradually you could see you're starting to fill in some areas and being able to comb an area that once before there was nothing to comb. Denial. That's the word. You try to deny you're losing your hair, but after a while, when you look in the mirror enough times, you see there's no denying it.
Larry's denial of his problem early on was typical. It took him a while to realize that his hair loss was excessive.
And he, like many men, probably noticed he was losing his hair before others did. And he started looking for a treatment program at the right time, before the loss became excessive and before the rest of the world noticed. He, like the others, made a decision to take control of his hair loss.
Doctors, thank you. Now, let's get back to the river.
Get ready. Drop the rider. Real strong. Hold that.
Nobody else gets any more benefit from it than I do.